Each year, USI hosts the Mid-America Institute on Aging and Wellness to educate the local community on health and wellness practices. We'll hear from USI and several of this year's keynote speakers. That's next on WNIN Newsmakers. Welcome to WNIN Newsmakers. I'm your host, April Nading. USI recently hosted the 18th Mid-America Institute on Aging and Wellness. Here to talk about this year's conference is USI's Dr. Kevin Valadares. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, April.
So tell me, what is the purpose of this conference?
So the Mid-America Institute on Aging, or MAIA, as it was founded in 2008 as really a venue to bring individuals together to learn about the aging process. So it's practitioners, but it also involves individuals who are caregivers, professional and just family caregivers, and older adults themselves. It really focuses on body, mind, and spirit. So it's much more of a holistic conference. It's usually aging conferences focus on medical issues and diagnosis, and this is not that. It also has the benefit of having a number of vendors who really represent a wide variety of services to support individuals as they're aging or support caregivers as they're assisting their loved ones. So it's really an all-encompassing conference, and we're just glad to be hosting it at USI.
Now, how is it that USI came to be the host for this?
So the founding dean of the College of Nursing and Health Professions, Dr. Nadine Coudray, was extremely visionary, really had this in the back of her mind, and like any good leaders, grabbed a group of people together from the community, from the university, and said, we should really host something that celebrates aging, but also where people can learn about upcoming trends, new ideas from around the country. And so this really started as a kernel of idea and has grown now to just this past 18th version.
So it actually started at USI?
It did. It started at USI. Mm-hmm. It's been hosted every year in mid-August since 2008, and we look forward to many more of the MAIA conferences.
Well, tell me, what do you mean exactly by aging? What is the age? What age is that, I guess?
Sure. So there isn't a age that we're really pinpointing. Like you can think about Social Security or Medicare and you think about the age 65. And some people think about that number as retirement age, although that's shifting as well. So there isn't really a number because even though we're all aging, it's a focus on older adults. What that means is where people are in their lives. And certainly there are individuals in this region, in this community, who are working through life with chronic illnesses, and some who are rampantly playing pickleball at an older age. And so it really doesn't define the age, but certainly there are participants of the conference, individuals from the community who are anywhere between 60 and 90 who participate, and caregivers who come, professional and family of all ages and backgrounds as well.
So how do you select, or what kind of process do you use for picking the topics and speakers for the conference?
Right, so there's a team, a MAIA team, and they're actually conveniently called the Blue Shirts because at the beginning they all adopted blue shirts, and they're just now called the Blue Shirts. It's their code name. And so it's really a diverse team of individuals from the community, all ages, all backgrounds, and they start the process almost immediately after the previous conference is done. And whether it be national speakers, depending on the topics, certainly regional speakers, but the idea is to really look for some different different individuals who are doing some different things. Anything from bringing the arts into healing to a physician talking about some sort of pharmaceutical. And so it really is diverse, and that's really the purpose of it.
So what were some of the topics that were focused on this year?
So this year there's, there are 4 keynotes because this is a Thursday and a Friday conference. So the keynotes are Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and then lots of sessions in between. And usually the keynotes are more national speakers. So the focus this year was on addiction and aging, issues with law enforcement or perhaps crime and older adults, advanced care planning. And then there's generally a topic, a keynote that is fairly inspirational, that really cuts across all kinds of disciplines, is maybe not an expert in aging, but will bring a different perspective to the conference. And the keynotes are also available for anyone to participate as well, so anyone from the community can come.
Oh, that's one thing I was going to ask is who does attend? I mean, is it just from the community, or people come from outside, I would think?
From certainly all over. It really is a mix of professionals, families, older adults who are interested, who would like to learn more and put stuff into practice. So it's anywhere between, let's say, about 250. I think the highest number we've had is about 400 participants. They are all mainly from the tri-state and Midwest area as well. But it's really something that individuals look forward to quite a bit. We have instituted just a few years ago, thanks to our Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Program grant, we're really interested in especially older adults from rural communities in southwestern Indiana coming, so they're able to attend for free at no cost, and transportation is provided to them. And so really trying to get individuals to come, and having the transportation makes it easier.
Well, why do you think it's important to have this every year?
You know, certainly what it does is it brings people together. And it brings people together with ideas, but also it's become a sense of community as well, where individuals see each other, they can learn, they can share as well, but they can make connections that last well beyond the conference as well. So it's not just coming for 2 days and going back to work or going back home. It's really connecting with individuals long afterwards. And so we hosted at USI because our role is education. And this is an educational conference at its foundation. And we have developed a strength in aging education, in trying to also grow the aging workforce and provide a diverse array of topics.
One of the topics discussed in this year's event was advanced care planning. Let's hear from Dr. Susan Hittman, who has been educating and conducting research on advanced care planning and end-of-life decision-making since 1998.
Advanced care planning is really about preparing people for communication and decision-making, and there are lots of different outcomes that can be the result of that communication. I think the COVID pandemic really heightened people's attention to the importance of planning and anticipating what might be, and it became clearly especially important for people with serious illness who were vulnerable and potentially going to face more serious consequences and complications from the illness. I would say anyone and everyone should be identifying who they want to serve as their healthcare representative. I think for people with college-age students who are leaving home for the first time, I think people often don't realize that once a child reaches 18 and leaves home for whatever purpose, parents don't have the right to necessarily be the decision maker, and if that's what they all want, it should be documented and recorded. People also often have these kinds of conversations about general planning during estate planning, so it's a good opportunity. I think the other times are when, within the healthcare setting, when someone has a diagnosis of chronic illness that may have more serious complications down the road. It's a really good opportunity to start thinking about the what ifs. And then certainly when someone has admission to a hospital or a long-term care facility, it's a really good and important time to revisit those conversations and think about this new changed context and how that affects decision making. How to be a good advocate on behalf of your loved one. I think there's some balance there between really advocating for what that person has indicated is important to them, and then also being aware that often, particularly in the hospital setting, the context and the situation is changing pretty rapidly. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to, ask for information, ask for education, ask for support. That's part of the role of an advocate, is to support that decision making, and that requires good current information. So I really encourage people who are serving in that role to speak up and to not be afraid to question or even challenge when it seems like things are happening that are inconsistent with what that person wanted. I think another way in which family members can help advocate is to engage other family members and parts of the broader network. So the advocate can really serve as a connection and communication point to help ensure that the family member who lives across the country and hasn't seen mom in a year isn't, suddenly up in arms that decisions are being made that reflect the reality, but it isn't the reality that they know and understand. So that kind of communication is an important part of advocacy. I think part of what we're really hoping to move towards is a process in which people are educated ahead of in the moment decisions, so they're better prepared for them. It's sometimes absolutely unavoidable, inescapable that you'll need to make decisions in an emergency situation, and it may be something you're not prepared for or didn't expect. But having conversations ahead of that time period, thinking about values, thinking about what's important, what acceptable trade-offs are for a person in terms of quality of life, that can really inform those emergency in-the-moment decisions and give people a lot more confidence in that situation than if they just walk in cold and have no information to base the decisions on.
Still with us to discuss more about advanced care planning is Dr. Kevin Valadares from USI. Thank you for sticking around.
Sure thing.
So where does someone start with advanced care planning?
So maybe I can throw out a definition first. Advanced care planning is really what the three words suggest. It's planning about your health care or your desires for health care in advance when you're not or in a crisis. And so it's conveniently known as ACP, Advanced Care Planning, and it's really a process. It's a process that individuals really can go through with family members, with friends, with their medical providers, and only about 20 or 25% of adults in this country have a designated plan, which we refer to as an advance directive, a living will, or a durable power of attorney. Those are terms that individuals might have heard. In the state of Indiana, we've had some changes in our advance directive laws. Actually, they're a little more simple to use. And so we really encourage individuals to focus on two things. First is to designate an individual who could speak for you when you're unable to speak for yourself. And that could be at any age, but certainly as we age, we might find ourselves with more health issues in the hospital, in the intensive care unit, and the medical providers might not know what our wishes are unless we either share with them what they are on a piece of paper or verbally, or there's someone who can help us with that. We call that a healthcare representative in the state of Indiana. So I've been engaged in this work actually through USI since 2014, and it really started in New Harmony, Indiana, which is really maybe an odd place to start advanced care planning work, but it turned out to be, and it still is, a wonderful place, where residents of New Harmony were really interested in seeing if advanced care planning conversations could occur among them in the community of New Harmony, in sort of this utopian idea. And so we started an initiative called New Harmony Conversations, where we really had facilitated conversations with individuals, and then it really has spread since then.
So how important is it for people to let their loved ones know what their wishes are for long-term decisions?
I mean, it's really crucial. It's probably not something that individuals certainly think about or want to think about, but just keep in mind that if individuals are planning the birth of a child or a wedding, there's a lot of planning that goes into that. Now, those are obviously joyous moments. Right. But this, the notion of ACP, Advanced Care Planning, is really meant to support individuals long before anything happens. And so they're not in a state of crisis, because making decisions in
when
a state of
crisis, the plans, right.
Really, it is the worst possible time for everyone. Regardless, decisions have to be made. And so where we've been assisting individuals is around a table, around a kitchen table, in a living room where it's a little more comfortable. Certainly, these decisions and conversations can be emotional. There's tears involved. For me, there's a lot of coffee involved. But it really is really a gift, and we use the term a gift that people can give to their loved ones by letting them know what their wishes are or who they choose to make those wishes for them, make those wishes known when they're unable to speak for themselves.
So is it enough, like let's say if I was in the hospital and something went really wrong, and my husband can just say, she has told me this is what she wants. I don't have a piece of paper, but she has told me. Is that effective?
That's perfectly fine, absolutely fine. So there's a couple things that really probably should happen in advance. You and your husband should have those conversations, and maybe they've been had over time. Usually as we have an experience ourselves, let's say in a healthcare institution, we say, I don't want to go through that again. Or we say a loved one, a parent, or an aging relative go through an experience, I would never want what Aunt Jane wants. Those are important processes to think about, but also share. But certainly a piece of paper makes it a little bit more valid, but communication is fine. The challenge is when, and I'll just go back to you, April, if your husband says, this is exactly what you wanted, but there's somebody else that says, no, I don't think so. When there's a conflict, that's the issue. Right. And therefore having something on a piece of paper with you, sort of enunciating that really is much easier.
Right, it makes it and it makes it somewhat legal.
Right.
Add a little more to that.
Exactly.
But can people change their advanced care plans in the future?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're totally, they're not set in stone at all. They can change them. In fact, it's actually very common for individuals to change their minds while they're hospitalized because they're going through the emotion of it as well. So it's not required to have an advance directive. It really is recommended, but individuals are certainly free. And the example that I give when I talk to students at USI is when individuals get their driver's license at the age of 16, they're asked, do you want to be an organ donor? And actually most individuals say yes because they really just want the license.
Right.
Well, they make that decision when they're 16 and maybe there's a heart or symbol on their driver's license and it remains in their purse and wallet. But if they never share that with any family member, friends, and then God forbid something happens, that really doesn't mean anything.
Really mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything at all. It's not a bad thing that the Bureau of Motor Vehicles says, do you want to be an organ donor? But there's a lot of thought and decision making that goes into that.
Well, thank you so much for all your good information. We appreciate you being here.
Sounds good. Thanks, April.
You're welcome. Another topic discussed at the conference was aging and addiction, presented by addiction expert Deanna Crosby.
Our metabolism starts to slow down as we get older. Many of us are aware of that. So what happens is we can't drink as much as we once did. So people have to make a conscious decision to actually drink less. Start slow. Really celebrate the small wins. If you drink one drink less this week than you did last week, in a month, you're going to feel better. I personally don't think the why is as important in the beginning as the what are we going to do to change your life. Often we see people cross addicted. Once they stop drinking, they might look for other areas to obtain the dopamine and have the immediate gratification, which could be like gambling, work, food, sugar, lots of different addictions that they have to be careful of because they don't want to go from one to the other. What we joke about is don't put down the bottle and pick up the fork. The advice I would give to families loved ones who are watching their friends and families potentially suffer from addiction is take care of yourself first. There's a free 12-step program called Al-Anon to help loved ones of people that are suffering with substance abuse. They specialize in like parent meetings or spouse meetings or work meetings or doctors. And you can just show up, you don't have to talk, it's free, you can sit in the back and listen and see what you think. Also, Al-Anon has Zoom meetings all day, every day, and you can find really valuable answers to how to help somebody with their problem.
Here to talk more about addiction and aging is Susie Shank, a licensed mental health and addiction counselor and a presenter at one of the sessions at the MAIA conference. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Now tell me, what are some of the first signs of addiction and how can individuals recognize it in themselves or in their loved ones?
Sure. Some of the first signs, I guess what we want to pay attention to are changes in behavior, appearance. How are people putting themselves together? Or is it different than normal? Also, are they showing up or are they not showing up for things? Which can be a little bit complicated because you have to notice the absence of someone, which sometimes takes us a little bit longer. Also, alert level, I guess, if we felt like somebody was kind of falling asleep or nodding off, or let's say you were having a conversation about something and they don't recall the events or don't have the memory of the situation, you want to take note of that. Also, if somebody is without a substance, they go a day or two without medication or alcohol, and they start to have symptoms like sweating or shaking, irritability, those are signs that things are progressing and advancing.
Because I could kind of see where with someone who's aging, some of those symptoms you might attribute to them aging.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things you want to collect. You want to collect the signs and kind of then look at what you have in front of you before you jump to any conclusions or say this is what something is.
Are there differences, though, in the risk of addiction in older individuals?
Sure. In addition to our metabolism changing, our overall health is going to change. So perhaps we're more medically fragile or we have new medications that we didn't have previously. So now there's an interaction with taking this means you can't drink alcohol or, it just changes kind of what's going on within our system or causes an interaction that wasn't there before. Also, there's a bit of a misconception that older adults don't have substance use issues, so there may not be the conversations or the questions asked of them as consistently, which truthfully can be a real issue. This is one of those areas we really need to be honest with our providers, because if we were to have a medical emergency or a procedure and we then find ourselves in withdrawal, we have a second complication going on that the provider may not have been aware of.
So I guess a lot of times people with the older population, people will assume that if they're just over medicated, not choosing to take the medication.
Right, or depending on what medication it
Abuse.
is, they may be taking more to, for instance, pain medication. Sometimes you start to take more because it's not affecting the pain in the same way. But unfortunately, that's not safe to do. You need to stay with what is prescribed. So it may or may not be a choice, but they may be trying to attend to symptoms that they're having.
But then it becomes abusive.
It does. It
Not
can.
necessarily intentionally.
Unfortunately, yeah. I think a lot of people know about the opioid crisis, but they don't realize those are pain meds that maybe were prescribed for an incidental, a tooth issue or something like that people might have.
What about, is there a difference in how you approach recovery based on someone's age?
I think also a little bit of a generalization is that older adults might be more likely to take care of things on their own, or try to go cold turkey. That's really dangerous when we're talking about alcohol or benzodiazepines. And again, that's a big word, so what does that mean? That means anxiety meds. So Xanax, Ativan, things like that. We need help to come off of those medications. Same thing with alcohol. It's not safe to just quit cold.
And do you think maybe they also, especially with older people, that if they really think their doctor prescribed it, that they might say, well, the doctor said I should be taking this?
Absolutely. And there are a lot of documentaries out right now about the pain medication crisis, that at one point that was going in one direction, and now we know that's not a safe med for people to be on long term or to be taking consistently.
In addition to older, or is addiction in older adults more commonly something they've dealt with for a long time? Or is it just as likely that maybe it starts later in life?
It's really individual. It could be something that has been going on, and because of a change, now it's more of an issue in their life. Or it could also be something that comes in later in life because there's a loss of a partner, a spouse, a meaningful piece of their life that they no longer have, and they're trying to substitute.
What would be the safest way to get rid of prescription drugs if someone decides, okay, I have a problem, or they recognize their relative does? What's the safest way to get rid of
Great question. You can call hospitals, pharmacies. Most pharmacies will take things back. Law enforcement agencies have take-back days that you can bring them. I would encourage you to call ahead just to see what everybody's policy is. There's also a bag that you can purchase on Amazon or where at a pharmacy that allows you to put your medications into it, and it will dissolve them. Much safer. We don't want people to flush medications.
Right, that was the old thing, right?
Exactly. It's not good for our water source.
Right. I mean, I can remember that when I was a kid. Everybody would just flush them down the toilet,
absolutely.
and that is not the thing you want to do.
Not a good idea.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was very informative.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks to all of our guests for helping us understand the Maya Conference and discuss some health topics to think about as we age. Next week, we'll get an update on local road projects. Thanks for watching WNIN Newsmakers.